Welcome, everybody. We're excited to have you at number 3 in the series of conversations on soil health. This series is designed for our agency's field staff to gain ideas from across the country that can be implemented locally. So approaches to taking soil health to the next level in your area, to engaging farmers and partners, to problem solving and continuing to find solutions that lead to increased adoption of soil health management systems. There's just so much to learn out there, and I think all of us, staff, partners, producers, the agricultural community at large, we're really learning that soil health is a journey, not a destination, and there's always more to learn for each and every one of us. So these conversations are about that. We all have something valuable to share. We all can learn something from each other. And as we work with innovative producers and across the varied partners we have across the country, there's a lot of excitement that's been building. New passion is growing in farming communities like we haven't seen before, and you will see that expressed by our speakers again today. So I want to say we want to hear from you as we continue to organize these conversations. We want to hear what your questions are. What topics would you like to have us focus on? Do you have insights, successes, solutions, and challenges that you would like to share? Do you have speakers that you'd like to recommend? Do you want to give a presentation or facilitate a discussion around topics that are near and dear to you out there in the field? So please do let us know, contact any of the speakers, contact folks from the Soil Health Division, and let us know what you want to hear about. So with that, let's get going on today's conversation. Doug Peterson, our soil health specialist from the Central region, will moderate the discussion again today, and we have 5 NRCS staff from across the country who are sharing their experiences. We have Marnie Thompson from Montana. We have Joanne Hardy from Arkansas. We have Chad Cochran from New Hampshire. We have James Bilbrey from Texas and Don Donovan from Indiana. So welcome to all those speakers.
I'm Marnie Thompson. I live in the great state of Montana. I started out as a soil con, was a DC for 12 years, and resource con for programs, and then I am currently the resource con for technology in the Great Falls area, which mainly covers north central Montana. My soil health story started when I was a district conservationist in southwest Montana. I watched a YouTube video of Ray Archuleta, and I was so excited about it. I had all my staff come in and we watched it again, and I really haven't turned back since then. Doug Peterson said that our mission is just to showcase ideas and give you ideas for promoting soil health amongst a lot of workload. And I know that workload is real out there. I know the deadlines are real and customer desktop issues are real. And so I know it's tough, but my mentor's advice a long time ago to me was telling me that there's lots of things that you have to do, but make sure you take time every week, whether you schedule that in your Outlook calendar every Friday, maybe every other Friday, or maybe just Friday mornings, but get out in the field. Spend time with producers, do follow-up, and you will learn so much, and I do try to follow that advice. My presentation today will be more statewide than just county. I'm going to showcase a lot of my soil health comrades in the state of Montana who are doing a bunch of cool stuff. I kind of live by this picture. You can ask my husband and my children and my coworkers. They do get sick of hearing about soil health all the time. But I really honestly believe that it affects everything we do in NRCS, all of the land uses that we deal with. It affects our food and it affects our nutrition. So soil health in Montana really started in Baker, Montana. It's eastern Montana with Ann Fisher. 15 years ago, she started having agronomy workshops. She brought in Gabe Brown and Jay Fear, probably before they were as famous as they are now. She also brought Jay Fear to the state of Montana to talk to all the NRCS district conservationists. And so I owe her a lot of credit. I still continually call her and ask her questions. So this picture is a bunch of conservation districts around her. Her district bought a no-till disc drill with a CIG grant, and they had a field day to learn how to plant cover crops so that they could help others. Montana has been very good with equipping the field offices with tools that we can promote soil health. We have tabletop rainfall simulators that we use in the wintertime. We have infiltration kits that we use in the field, and then we have them in little drawstring baggies that we can hand to producers. We have a wind simulator. We do soil health videos every year. The rainfall simulator, I can't stress enough how awesome this demonstration is and just the impact that we get from producers from running the simulator. It does take time to get the samples and set it up, but I know I had a producer say he just loves watching it and he learns something new every time. No-till gardening, there's several NRCS Montana employees that practice no-till gardening. I started mine 9 years ago because I thought if I'm going to talk the talk, I better walk the walk. So we do workshops with garden clubs, and it's been really successful. I figure one way to a farmer or rancher is through his wife, and we've shown that to work. In Western Montana, Ben Montgomery has been very successful with doing pasture walks. They go out with farmers and ranchers in that area. They visit a different producer's place every time. They talk about intensive grazing and the tools each producer uses and tips and tricks for that. So that has been very successful. Ladies' Day on the Range, there's several district conservationists that have done this in central Montana and eastern Montana. I think this has been very successful because the women don't necessarily have workshops, especially for them, for farming and ranching, even though they are an integral part of the farm and ranch out here. And so we go out on the range, they learn plant ID, we talk about soil health concepts. On rangeland, we've done infiltration rings, and the women tend to probably feel more freely to ask questions in these smaller groups with their peers. The great thing is we have a potluck, and they bring lots of great food. In 2017, Montana NRCS teamed up with the Montana chapter of Soil, Water, and Conservation Society. We rented a large passenger bus and headed to Pierre, South Dakota, and Bismarck, North Dakota, visited Minokan Farm and Gabe Brown's ranch. We had 56 people from the state of Montana, and then we did get a few out-of-staters also. This was an awesome trip. I can't tell you the energy and inspiration that I received from it, but just lots of thank yous and energy from this group. And they have turned out to be some of our panel speakers because they have gone home and instigated some of the stuff on their own places. You can't talk about soil health without talking about Jay Fear. I think he's the czar of soil health. Sometimes he even brings his underwear, which can be a bit embarrassing. He has visited our state several times to speak to NRCS employees. He's been an inspiration to a lot of us here in Montana, and then we've had him do smaller workshops out in the field with producers. He's helped us run the rainfall simulator, the tabletop simulator. We were lucky enough to get him before he retired to come to northeastern Montana and showcase his latest tool, the wind simulator, which is a great tool, easy to pack around. You can do it inside and outside, and we have since purchased a couple of those in the state of Montana and have presented those. Again, in eastern Montana this year, they invited several counties of juniors and senior high school students and brought in soil health innovators in those counties, some in North Dakota and Montana, did breakout sessions with these young kids. It was very successful. The kids really appreciate it. They are going to continue with that, but probably will invite first-year college students to that as well. So that was really successful and a way to reach our young kids. Another group that's been recently formed, it was instigated by Ann Fisher again and Sue Fitzgerald in Eastern Montana. It was just trying to get like-minded people together, or our soil health innovators. A lot of times these innovators are maybe the only one in their county or the only one in their area. And talking to these guys, a lot of them feel kind of alone. They maybe get made fun of in their county. There's a talk at the coffee shop. And so it was super helpful for these guys to get together with like-minded people and other soil health innovators just for support and to talk about their ideas. And this group has really taken off. It's formed their own Facebook page, and they are going to meet again this summer and tour each other's places. So looking forward to seeing what that group does in the future. Our statewide events, we started in 2011 with 2 workshops that Ray Archuleta did for us in 2 different locations, and we haven't quit since then. Before this last year, we had a whole week where we would bring in keynote speakers that would travel to 5 or 6 locations across the state of Montana. We would partner that with producer panels. We have our partners with the Montana Conservation Districts that help us with that. This last year, we decided to go big or go home, and so we went big with our first annual Soil Health Symposium. It was a huge success, far beyond our expectations. We had over 400 people, a large waiting list. We are already planning that for 2021 and a little bit also in 2022. We've increased our capacity to 600. There again, we work with our local conservation districts. We have a team of NRCS employees that help with that, and we've hired an event planner. So that's just so encouraging to see all the producers that got so excited about that. And so we're pretty excited about the future of that. So just to end, I want to share with you a quote. We can do anything we want to do if we stick to it long enough. Probably 10 years ago, I read a study that talked about if there is a new innovation or a new way of thinking, it takes a person hearing it 21 times before they truly understand it and can truly adopt it. And so I think that is key. I think sometimes we get frustrated and we keep talking about things and maybe we don't see the change as fast as we would like. But I had a producer in Eastern Montana who told me, Marnie, you guys just have to keep on beating the drum because sometimes it takes us just a little bit longer to adopt this stuff. And so I take that to heart, and I'm thankful for all of the great employees that are here in Montana that have kept beating the soil health drum here in Montana. And as I drive around the state, I think we're making a difference. Thank you. I have my contact information here if anybody would like to contact me later.
Very good, Marnie. Thank you so much. As we're changing slides here, one comment that you made, that just was so critical, I thought, was how you tried to make time to spend time with producers in the field. Any other suggestions for new folks? There's a lot of new folks coming on, and it's really easy to get bogged down doing things in the office. And so other than that, spending Friday, what's some other messages you could give to folks on how to spend some time?
So I think it's, especially for new employees, it can be kind of intimidating to go out with farmers or ranchers, and maybe we feel like they don't really want to see some of the stuff that we're doing. And I am always so surprised when, like this week, we went out and did infiltration rings in the field, pounded them in, and sometimes that takes quite a while because you have to sit there and wait for the water to go through. And the landowners just really appreciate you spending that time out in the field, and they ask a lot of questions. And it's a real visual demonstration for them to see, and it kind of just helps them understand all the concepts. So just, even though you may be intimidated by going out, just do it. And the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it, and the more help you're going to be to these guys.
Very good, very good. We're going to move on here. So one thing I do want to remind our listeners is if you have a question, you can put that over in the Q&A pod, and I'll try to get to those at the end or in between if we have a minute. So we're gonna jump from Montana now. We're gonna head south and east, and we're gonna go down to Arkadelphia, Arkansas. We're gonna listen to Joanne Hardy. She's the district conservationist down there. Joanne, how is things in Arkansas?
It's hot down here.
Very good. Well, it's hot everywhere this week, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Very good. So what have you got to share with us?
Well, I am the district conservationist here in Arkadelphia, Arkansas. Okay, I'd like to tell you about one of my producers, Glenn Hill. Glenn has a small cow-calf operation here in Clark County. He also works part-time as a technician for the Conservation District, so I've spent quite a bit of time with him and had the chance to get better acquainted with him than I have had with most of my producers. Even before he started working here at the office, Glenn has been working with NRCS to try to meet his production goals. One of the problems he's had to deal with is the lack of forage in the winter and early spring. It seemed that no matter how much hay and range cubes he put out, his girls were always hungry and bawling at him over the fence. Another problem was that his pastures turned into a churned up, muddy mess every winter because of reduced grass coverage and persistently rainy weather. So, fast forward to the summer of 2019. I attended the Soil Health and Sustainability course that was held in Hope, Arkansas. It was hotter than blue blazes there at that time of the year, but the course was great, and the presenters brought a lot of good information to the table. One segment in particular really caught my attention: grazing cropland. The more I heard during this presentation, the more convinced I became that these practices might work for Glenn in his pastures and help him address his resource concerns. I took notes like crazy during this segment so I could go back and share the information with Glenn. At the next break, I hunted up Troyce Barnett, the state agronomist in Arkansas, to run my ideas by him. He agreed with me that these practices would help solve Glenn's problems, and he also pointed me toward a cover crop seed catalog. He showed me the charts in the catalog that rank all the cover crops in the categories of forage quality, cold kill temperatures, biomass production, and so on. Troyce told me to take a couple of the catalogs back to the office so I could show them to my producers. So the next time Glenn was scheduled to work, I asked him to come into my office and started telling him what I had learned in the soil health training. I showed him what Troyce had shown me in the seed catalog, and I sent him home with one of the catalogs so he could read up on the various types of cover crops and what they could do for his pasture. Fast forward another week. Glenn came into the office all excited. He had played with the numbers recommended in the catalog, but ultimately wound up calling the seed company. The sales rep there worked with him, tweaked his original plan a bit, and made some suggestions on how to improve on it. So then last September, Glenn used a no-till drill and planted black oats, cereal rye, bursum clover, forage collards, and chicory, and he threw in a little ryegrass seed for good measure. He planted 20 acres in this mix, and in another 20-acre field he planted white clover and collards. He's got one 12-acre field that he keeps in crimson clover just because it's out by the road and it looks pretty. He had trouble at first with deer and geese eating it as fast as it came up. In fact, they ate so much that he was afraid his cows wouldn't see any benefit from it at all. But finally the weather improved and we had some sunshine, and all the seed mix seemed to just take off and was finally growing faster than the varmints could eat it. While the cover crop mix was growing and taking off, Glenn was installing electric cross fencing to get started on a rotational grazing system. This was part of an EQIP contract, and it was just a happy coincidence that the fencing was going up at the same time the seed mix was growing by leaps and bounds. Now you can see from the pictures how successful this project was. Glenn told me that his cows were slicker and fatter much earlier in the year than what had been the case in prior years. His main goal all along was to keep his cows fed and happy, but at the same time he achieved some of the goals of cover crops in his pastures. He kept the soil covered and kept a diverse system of living roots in the soil. Our intention was to hold a pasture walk to let other cattle producers take a look at what he had accomplished. In fact, Glenn had already contacted a sales rep from the seed company to come and speak at our planned pasture walk. However, COVID-19 reared its ugly head, and since we weren't able to host large groups, we decided not to pursue a pasture walk this year. But Glenn wasn't able to stop his neighbors from noticing what was going on with his beautiful green pastures when their fields hadn't even greened up yet. The neighbors who stopped to ask him questions got a Cliff's Notes version of the soil health class that I attended. And I think that's what constitutes a success story, passing information forward to help educate farmers on how to keep their soil healthy while achieving their production goals. And that's the end of my presentation.
Very good. You know, I think your message is just so important. You know, you're relatively new on this soil health journey, but boy, you just jumped right in and started with somebody. You know, what do you think is needs to be the thing that gets more of our staff to just jump in with soil health? I mean, it was just the training that got you going?
Yes, that really, I'm a relatively new DC, and that was very informative for me. I really enjoyed it and learned a lot, and I would recommend more soil health training.
Mm-hmm. Very good, very good. All right, well, looks like we're gonna move on east a little bit further. We're gonna be joined by Chad Cochran from Concord, New Hampshire. Did I get that right, Chad? Concord. We had this discussion yesterday.
That's pretty good.
Very good. What have you got to share with us today?
Well, yeah. Hi, everyone. I appreciate being invited to attend today. Not quite talking about soil health, but how we talk about soil health. So that's kind of fun. I'm a resource conservationist. I work statewide in the state of New Hampshire. One of my roles and responsibilities is agronomy for field crops and the soil health that goes along with it. I thought I would start by just talking a bit about New Hampshire. I think us in New England, we get lost in this gobbledygook of small states that no one can quite remember from high school geography. But we are there right in the middle between Vermont, Maine, and Massachusetts, way up north. We're a small state, obviously, very rural. Our largest city is 100,000 people. We're 85% forested. And if you Google an image search of New Hampshire, you'll see something like that, right? We have, beautiful mountains and scenery, lots of rocks in our soil, and a short growing season. But like everywhere across our country, agriculture is a key part of what makes any community function. We have a really vibrant fruit and vegetable sector with small-scale farming and a vibrant dairy sector as well, although they're struggling like everyone across the country right now. We have really high direct farm sales in our state, actually nationally high for that, probably due to our small-scale and rural nature. But we suffer from a limited agricultural infrastructure because we don't have large farms that spend a lot of money on new tractors. And I'm saying all this for a couple reasons. One, so you all out there know where I come from, what's my point of view and what's my background, but also just to focus on that sense of place, because I think that's very important when we're talking about soil health and thinking about trying to create a movement wherever you're at in your state, in your county, even in a town or small community. Really think about what resources do you have, what resources don't you have, what do you do well, what do you struggle with. So that sense of place, I think, is really key. But the foundation really, I think, for any really vibrant soil health program is partnerships, is building partners. Because if we're really trying to do something as big as soil health, which changes everything about the way farmers operate, you can't do that alone. It's just too much. We in the NRCS can't do it alone, and our partners can't do it alone. We all need to work together. Because soil health deals with some science that isn't fully vetted yet in some cases, it's always new. There's new information coming out. We're bound to have some disagreements about how we think things should happen with our farmers that we work with. So it can be a bit divisive, and it's good to have those arguments and those discussions, but it's great to have it in an environment where you trust one another, you have camaraderie with one another, you can duke it out kind of behind the scenes, and then when you go out onto farms, you and the partners are speaking together about the direction that you see, your state or area moving. Partners also help you rally around goals, build momentum, and I think really importantly, you can all talk about what roles and responsibilities you're going to have. So if one partner really wants to do something, or it's something they feel they have specialty in, they can do that, and you don't get turf battles going on between partners, which gets ugly fast. In New Hampshire, we do have a soil health partnership that we started kind of out of necessity because we had so much interest in soil health in the state. We had Extension and NRCS and conservation districts all out there doing soil health stuff willy-nilly without any real direction. And we were having farmers having to choose between one event or another. And we said, this is kind of ridiculous. We should really be more focused. So we came up with a soil health partnership, helps us with our grant applications as well as our outreach and workshops. The more that we can pool our resources and talent and not duplicate our efforts, the better. Whether you are a soil con in a field office, a DC, or someone working statewide, you have limited time. We all do. So it's really important to make sure we're using that time wisely. And like I said, it really helped us in New Hampshire speak statewide with one voice. There's nothing worse than talking to a farmer about something, him liking the idea, but thinking you're a little bit crazy, so he calls Extension, and in a well-meaningful way, they steer him another direction. Where at least if you're all talking amongst all of the agencies and everyone involved, that kind of thing is less likely to happen. And that can happen in all directions from all of the different partners. Our partnership is Extension and the Land Grant School, all of our districts across the state, the NRCS and the Soil Health Division, and then we try to get as many private crop consultants involved as well, our State Department of Ag, organic people, that type of thing. One thing that's great about partnerships is they help you think strategically. And that is really where we struggled early on. And we have gotten better, I think. Asking yourself, where are you now and where do you want to go? Really, it's just as simple as setting some goals. And in New Hampshire, we really wanted to up our game in cover cropping. There was a lot of interest in cover cropping when we started, even with our partnership, but it was all pretty much winter rye. So we really wanted to see what other species are viable out there, what works, what doesn't. We also wanted to expand no-till. And really look at cropping systems that have soil health at the heart, really pulling all the pieces of the puzzle together and making it easier for farmers to adopt. In our cover crop adventure, we really worked closely with the Soil Health Division, and they provided a lot of great input for us on developing some cover crop mixes that were targeted specifically for us at different niches in our farming community that we thought we could exploit for good measure. And they helped us with developing these mixes themselves, where they would go, helped us with funding even at that point in time, which we had none of. So hat off to the Soil Health Division on that. And what we did was we came up with 5 mixes. We did field scale plots, big enough so farmers would think it was worth it. We did provide free seed, which they really appreciated. And one critical thing that we did was we worked with local seed vendors. We knew we could get these mixes from some of the national seed companies with no problem, but we knew that a lot of our farmers like to work with local seed vendors. They had relationships with them. So we worked with local seed vendors on sourcing this, and that was actually quite a difficult chore at times because they were not used to these species either that we were trying out. So it was a lot of fun, but definitely a lot of work. So we were able to really grow some awesome cover crops that people really had not experienced before. We've never grown something like crimson clover up our way, and we found out where you can and where you can't grow crimson clover in New Hampshire. And we saw all the great benefits that, you know, cover crops provide, and it was just a real eye-opening opportunity and help us build relationships with farmers all across the state. We did lack capacity, though, to keep track of all of these cover crop plots once we got them on the ground. So one thing we did that was kind of fun and innovative was we used game cameras and time-lapse photography, like you see here, to every day or every couple times a day take a picture of the cover crop as it's growing in all weather and put together little montages of those videos so that people could see the way they grow. Pretty cool. Next thing we wanted to do was expand no-till in our state. And we were really a blank slate. We had practically no-till in New Hampshire probably 5 years ago. So we decided to go big or go home, and we worked on a CIG grant through the conservation districts to purchase corn planters like you see here with these integrated cover crop rollers and really get farmers to have very little excuse why they couldn't try no-till. Regardless of what kind of cover crop they were going into, but we really wanted to look at, can we do no-till from the start planting green? Can we get farmers kind of over that goalpost without having to struggle through the rest of it? So we ended up, you know, pulling these planters all across the state. We have 4 of them through all kinds of cover crops, and we had really great luck. And really our first hurdle here was just proving that, yes, you can do no-till in New Hampshire. It works. We're not that cold. You just have to do it right. So this is actually sweet corn you see growing here into that crimson clover cover crop I showed earlier. They're getting tons of nitrogen from this. It's working really great. The second kind of wave of no-till work we did was through a retrofit program. We got some grants to be able to take farmers' planters, some of the ones that use the rental machines, and retrofit them for no-till. So things like closing wheels that you see there or row cleaners. And this was really great because farmers had skin in the game. Not only did they have to pay a little money to get this done, but it was on their equipment. So once they did this, they were really all in on no-till, and it really changed things for the better. And the more people that do it, the more people have a hard time saying, why am I not doing it? And what's really fun for me, you know, is we work with a farmer and we get things working right, and they send me a picture like this via text message and say, wow, this really works great. I think this was a good idea. Our last goal was really cropping systems, and this is where we're at now as a state, is really fleshing out everything and putting it together. So we're trying to work with the veggie farmers as much as we can, doing things like no-till transplanting like you see here, no spray or low spray no-till solutions. That's a criticism we hear a lot about no-till is the herbicide use. With all our direct farm sales, that's a really big deal to a lot of our farmers. And on the dairy side, you know, the big objection we hear to no-till now isn't that it doesn't work, but it's what do I do with my manure? So trying to get manure injection working across the state. And I want to now talk a little bit about the way that I and a lot of the partners that we work with work on soil health. And I think the biggest thing is that you really need to cultivate relationships with farmers. You know, if you're a soil con, I totally understand where you're at, where that workload is. You got to go out, you got to get paperwork signed, you got to get contracts obligated. But really, you've got to cultivate a relationship when you're out there with farmers. Soil health takes a lot of trust. And if you can get farmers to trust you and be willing to take some risks along with you, then you'll get stuff done. And if you can find those key farmers that are agents of change in your community, latch on to them. That was a lesson I learned from this guy, Ray Archuleta. We were on a farm quite a few years ago now, and we were driving back from it. And we were in a vehicle together, so I couldn't escape. And he grabbed me and he pulled me uncomfortably close. And he said, Chad, that farm we were just on, don't let that guy go. He's key. And sure enough, he was right. He was right. So we've been able to do amazing things with that farmer that he identified. You know, he could just tell that he had the right personality and outlook for trying new things. So find those farmers in your area, and they're going to convince everybody else. Also, something that's hard for me to stomach, because I am really a science nerd, but science doesn't sell, stories do. So whenever I can, I try to think about making soil health a human story. You know, like in this picture, I could talk about the cover crops that Zoe here is standing in. I could talk about the radish, but I could talk about why she's there. Why is she happy? You know, she's the one who drove the drill that year and planted these and saw that amazing success. And now she is an ambassador for cover cropping in that part of the state. So if you can talk about that, it's harder for people to argue with you when you're telling a story because it's someone else's story. It's not something you can argue. Oddly enough, data and science is something people love to argue about. And last, I just wanted to leave everyone with kind of an introspective point and think about where you're at on your personal journey in soil health. I do this all of the time. I look at myself and I say, where do I need to expand my knowledge? Am I a resource to the farmers and my other partners around me? Where do I need to grow? And I think it's really important that we all have a role to play in this, and we're all valuable. So make sure you treat yourself that way, and you identify where you want to go as an individual in this whole big movement. And that's about it. I think we got it covered. Thank you.
Chad, such a great presentation, man. The stuff that you guys have done up there. We did have one question that's a little different maybe from a lot of us. You guys have a lot of vegetable crops up there. We had a question, somebody was wanting to know about no-till gardening workshops. Did you guys do a lot with that kind of it's not exactly large-scale agriculture, but I know we've got a lot of those questions on that kind of stuff here in Missouri as well.
Yeah. I think that question was directed to Marnie early on, but you know, for us, I'll just say generally scaling down soil health is actually something we're trying to do a lot more of, and that really applies to the vegetable farmers. A lot of them operate maybe on 2 to 3 acres. They make a living doing that, but we don't have great solutions for them at that scale, including things that avoid using herbicide use. So that's really honestly the bleeding edge of where we're at. Right now, we're learning a lot from other people around the country that are doing that too. And we're actually trying to work as a region right now in New England to push this forward.
Yeah, very good. All right. Well, that was a great presentation. Thank you, Chad. So next, we're gonna move to country that I'm gonna guess, James, looks a little bit different than what it looked like where Chad's at in New Hampshire. We're gonna go to Texas, dry country in Texas, with Mr. James Bilbrey in Haskell, Texas. So James, is it look a little different in Texas where you're at than it did in New Hampshire where Chad was at?
Yes, sir. I think you could get just about the total opposite of what he was at. I'm the soil conservationist here in Haskell County, and also my soil health journey actually started when I was in Wichita County, and as my zone agronomist took me up to Bismarck, North Dakota for 4 days, and we hung out with Gabe Brown, Jay Fewer for a couple of days up there, and my thought was if this will work in North Dakota where they get 13 inches of rain and a short growing season, be amazed what we could do in Texas with 22 inches of rain and a growing season that starts somewhere around March 15th to November 11th, our average frost date. In some years, it's not until Thanksgiving. Here in Haskell, our annual rainfall is 22 to 24 inches. It's considered semi-arid to arid environment, but our biggest thing is, I think, is the seasonal rainfall. We usually get a large rain in May and June, and another large rain in September. And there's not much in between. Between September and June, there's hardly any rain. So we have to be able to capture those rains. Some of our challenges, like everywhere, we have a people challenge. Getting people to change from the way Grandpa done it to a newer, different. When you start speaking soil health to these guys, they start running backwards. But when you stick a shovel in the ground and you show them their compaction layers and the reason their plants are dying, it really opens them up. And in our area, since it's so hot and dry, water conservation is an easy way to sell soil health to them. Like this picture here shows on the left, it was a harvested wheat. It's same producer, same management. One side he harvested, the other side he put up electric fence and grazed it out. When he removed all the residue, he removed his ability to soak in the water. So water conservation is a big seller here in this part of Texas, is because our rainfall is so limited and it's so hot and it transpirates so much. Controlling the temperatures is another big seller. On the left here, you see it's 81 degrees. Both these photos were taken in June. One was in the cropland field that we were doing a cover crop, mixed species cover, and on the other one is less than 50 feet away on the neighbor who was conventional till. 10 degrees difference. In the peak of the summer, like right now, when the air temps are 100, I think today is supposed to be 104, you can go out there and take those soil temps in the various similar instances. It'd be 88 degrees in that green growing cover, and out there on bare ground, it'd be 135 to 155 degrees. So one thing here in this area was no rotation. Everybody was cotton behind cotton. This photo here is cotton coming up in a high residue cover crop. Our environment doesn't allow us to hold residue very long. This cover crop that was grown here, when it was frost killed in November, was in the 4,000 pound range. And after this winter of working on it and the microorganisms working below the surface, that was what was left, and that's what we planted the cotton into. And as you can see, we got a pretty decent stand. Then we go into just residue management. Like I said, the rotation, getting farmers to go from cotton, continuous cotton, to cotton wheat. Now we're doing cotton wheat covers for most of the cotton guys. This field here, this gentleman was conventional till when we started. Now we're doing cotton wheat to cover crop, allowing a frost kill and no tilling our cotton in. So we're getting a little bit more residue management built into these systems until we can eventually get them to do two covers behind that wheat crop, do a summer cover into a fall cover, and going right back into our cotton crop. No-till was a big push, since this farmer here, he was conventional tillage, and he first told me it wouldn't work. So I said, just try it on one farm. This is the farm he tried it on. This wheat crop was planted in September. When he got big enough to start grazing, which was in November, he grazed from November to March 1st, pulled off, used a stripper header to harvest the wheat. Then June 1st, we planted a warm season cover into it. And that's it coming up with lots of residue. And the plan is on this field is to drop in and start grazing it in about the first week of July to about the second week into August, spray and kill it and prepare that ground to take the September rain so we can plant the next wheat crop. Our warm season covers here, like I said, all we get is the June rain, and we have to absorb enough moisture to carry us until we either frost kill it or until we terminate it. Some of the things I've kind of figured out doing trial and error with different farmers is the species that we can plant here are like brown top millet, German foxtail millet, pearl millet, different sorghum Sudans, sunflowers, buckwheat, guar, cowpeas, mung beans, and guar are the species that I usually get success just about every time they're planted. Sunhip is hit and miss, and I haven't quite figured out why yet. We plant different seed rates. Someone that's really good with their drill, we can get all the way down to 350,000 seed per acre and still to get decent stand. This one here was in 550,000 seed per acre. For our arid environment, if we get much over 750,000 seed per acre, it'll burn itself out. And here we go into a winter cover. Same thing. I've adjusted the different seeding rates based on soil type and based on what equipment that the farmer uses. My range on the winter stuff, if you get much below 500,000 seeds, you don't get a good uniform stand across the fields. But if you get much over 900,000 seed, the crop burns itself out because it runs out of moisture. So there's a large learning curve for everything that I've done or worked with the producers with, of trying to figure out an ideal seeding mix and an ideal population to control our heat and droughty type conditions. So in conclusion, the learning curve steep. I've learned a lot, and I've tried to teach the producers a lot, but it's still since 2012, the learning curve's been straight up and down, and I'm grasping trying to stay up with it, but I think we're starting to do a good job. Thank y'all.
Thanks, James. So what do you think, James? What do you think the key to getting those producers to change is? Is there one thing that you have had more success in getting a producer to change from that conventional tillage to the soil health system?
Well, to get someone to change, one of my biggest things is just setting them and talking to them. I'm a farmer myself, so I kind of know the lingo. I think the water conservation is the key thing, especially when you start talking about transpiration rates on soil temps. Anytime you get above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, your transpirate's top 3 feet of water. That's a big thing here because our rain is, like I said, June and September, and if you don't capture that one and you waste it, letting it transpirate, you've lost your next crop. You might have lost the next 2 crops.
Very good. All right. Well, we're going to move now from Texas, a little area with a little bit more rainfall, to somebody that has probably as much experience as anybody in our group here. Don Donovan is district conservationist in Indiana, Park and Vermilion County. Don's been around soil health for a long, long time. Don, what's going on in Indiana in your part of the world?
Good afternoon. I am the district conservationist in Park and Vermilion County. We're on the west central Indiana, right on the Illinois line. And I've been in D.C. for 37 years, and a lot of that's been involved with soil health. Next slide. So over the years here in Indiana, we have done a lot of things with soil health and cover crop and no-till systems. We've had a lot of different kinds of groups that worked on this. And in 2011, we went to Burleigh County and saw what they were doing with soil health stuff up there, like a lot of other people have done. And we came back to Indiana, and we wrote the Indiana Soil Health Plan and strategy and presented that to our leadership team, and it was approved, and we built our soil health team from that. But as every DC knows, there's all these other things we do. I call them the Ps, the programs that we have to do. It's part of the job. We need to do that every day. And how do we find time to do the soil health stuff and take these farmers and ranchers and other people down the road, down their personal soil health path? We have a lot of interest. I have a lot of desire from local farmers for that information, but my time is limited in how much one-on-one I can do. And we can build soil health while implementing programs, but we need to go beyond that and provide that technical assistance. And farmers need to change their paradigm. This picture at the bottom was taken this spring. I've told a lot of farmers that their $300,000 planter will plant in blacktop. They just need to figure out how to do it. And as you can see, we got a pretty good corn stand in the Rock Road. So how do we change that paradigm? How do we provide the technical assistance that farmers need? And, you know, in 2010 and 11, I went to my 2 soil and water boards and said, we've got to find a way to support our farmers. They're asking for this assistance. How do we do it? Next slide. So what we did is the 2 boards got together. Because I am the DC of both boards, they've worked together for many, many years. And we started figuring out how we could come up with the funds to do this. Both districts were fortunate that they had some existing funds. We have a partnership program where for local businesses and farmers pay into the districts each year to be partners to help support programming. A lot of the local in-kind from the local boards and the local staff. And we went to this Clean Water Indiana grant program, which is administered through the Indiana State Board, Soil Conservation Board, and we applied for a Clean Water Indiana grant. Next slide. So this is the partners that we have. We have a tremendous, tremendous Indiana Conservation Partnership at the state level. We bring that all the way down to the local level, and we start putting together these ability to strengthen the ability to work with farmers one-on-one to provide the assistance that they desire. And one thing on here is our ag retailers. It's been mentioned before, you know, if you get your ag retailers on board, so at least they're negative, or they're not negative, but they're at least neutral. And in most cases, we've got a lot of ours are positive. So our ag retailers are on board with us. So if they go to the local co-op or they go to a local seed dealer, they're not hearing the opposite story or something negative. They're hearing the same story we're telling. And so this partnership has been extremely important in where we go. So building partnerships is going to get the job done. Next slide. So we started out, we got this grant, and we used that grant to hire a retired farmer / seed corn regional rep from an adjacent county. We did that on purpose a little bit to provide any eliminating potential conflict of interest. He knew everybody. I mean, he's one of those guys. He'd been a regional rep. He'd talked to everybody that's, you know, bought seed almost. And so he was easy for him to meet people and to go out and talk to farmers and start the process. And I'd say Larry set the table for us for future success. He got the ball rolling, and we did a lot of good things. And so after 4 years, he decided that he wanted to retire for good, and we had to go looking for somebody else. Next slide, please. And so the districts went out, and we went the totally opposite direction. Instead of a retired guy, we got a guy straight out of college almost, and we hired Carter Morgan. And Carter is a farmer from northern Vermilion County. He farms with his brother, his dad, and his uncle. They farm 2,800 acres approximately, and he'd just come back to the farm from Purdue. Now, he's the new generation of farmer, the farmer that isn't necessarily obsessed with driving a tractor. He's obsessed with the computer part of it, the data, processing data, making the data work for you and make it financially successful for you. And so we've taken that to our advantage, and he has worked a lot in working with farmers on data. Now, another thing that's ironic about Carter is that he had never known tillage. Never known tillage. His farm had never tilled while he was part of the farm, or at least old enough to be aware of what was going on. And so he was in college one day, and he had to write a paper on tillage equipment, and he had to call home to find out what these pieces of equipment did, because he did not know. And the most important thing about what he does for me is I'm a government employee. I know lots of things. I've traveled the country. I've looked at soil health systems all over, and I've had a tremendous amount of training, but I'm still a government employee. He brings the farmer-based credibility to the table. When I go out, when I send Carter out to talk to somebody, he's a farmer. His income depends on the decisions he makes that he's trying to get other folks to make. So that is the credibility that we need, that you need as DCs, to take it to the field and get farmers to change their paradigm. Next slide. So what does he do for us? A lot of face-to-face stuff in the field, on the tractor. in the machinery shed, you know, where in the coffee shop sometimes, wherever he needs to go to meet with farmers. We do a lot of field days, of course, everybody does. He's doing both local and statewide events now, but his biggest thing is he's on the phone a lot. And a lot of it is this hand-holding that I talk about down here below. You know, when he's planting, Carter runs does all the tendering when they plant in the spring. He does all of the grain cart work in the fall. So he's in the tractor a lot, but he also, based on what he does do, he has time to talk to people while he's actually farming. And so he's holding their hand as they try to plant corn through 6-foot-tall rye. He's holding their hand while they're trying to plant certain cover crops in the fall. So that is that farmer credibility, because he's been there, done that he brings to the table. We use him a lot, like I told on data. We're trying to figure out ways, both from an environmental standpoint and an economic standpoint, to reduce nitrogen use in corn in the Midwest, in the Corn Belt. We really need to do that. We got to clean up the Gulf of Mexico. So he's working with them, looking at their data versus yield, nitrogen input, stalk sample testing, to look at what they can do to start bringing nitrogen application down. We use a lot of roundtables. They flex whatever's going on at the time. He does cover crop mixes for them, using in conjunction with me and our seeding calculator. He's a facilitator, putting farmers together to solve problems. These two farmers have the same problem. Get them together. Let's talk a solution. We can't do much as an agency on termination recommendations. We have to be careful with that when it comes to taking down cover crops. He can do that for me. How do you take down rye when it's 8 inches tall versus 15 inches tall, or ryegrass or whatever? The last thing here is we're trying to reach new groups. And in my counties especially, we have a lot of farmers less than 35. We have a lot of farmers over 60. We don't have much in between. And so we're trying to, and the thing of it is these young guys and gals that are 35 and down are the ones driving the changes in their operation. They're the ones wanting their dad and grandpa to make changes. They see the need to change because they can't farm for 40 years the way we have the last 70. And so we're working with them to develop a peer group so they can work one-on-one with each other and develop the confidence they need to take this system forward. We've got an organic transition group working. The last thing here, Carter is a crimper dealer, so that gives him the opportunity to talk to people about the use of crimpers. And then the last thing here is the STAR program. This was part of the Illinois Nutrient Alliance project in Champaign County, Illinois. We brought it to Indiana, but it's a grading system for farmers. They can answer questions about how they farm, what kind of system they use. It gives them a star rating, 1 to 5. Currently, one of the local grain buyers is using a star rating. You have to be rated in order to sell grain there. We'd like to get to the point where you have to be a 3-star to sell grain there. And you know, if you're a 5-star, maybe you get a premium. So those are the kind of things we're trying to do to get an economic incentive for farmers to change outside of just the economic profit based on the system. Next slide. So these are some of the things we do. We're working with a lot of high residue systems where we're taking rye down at 6 foot tall, planting green, and crimping it. Sometimes we spray, sometimes we don't. The Vermilion County Soil and Water District does own a roller crimper, and it's ran over about 5,000 or 6,000 acres in the last 3 years. We've got some organic transition, like I spoke of. This field in the picture is an organic transition field. Massive amount of rye, high residue with soybeans planted just popping through. We've got some relay cropping. We're planting beans into wheat on skipped rows and cutting the wheat off, and then the beans flush through and are ready to go. Then the other picture is some high residue corn, or corn planted in a high residue where there's a hog manure put on it, trying to tie up the manure from an environmental standpoint, an economic standpoint, to make it ready for that corn crop to use. Next slide. So one family's journey here in Park County is a 3-generation farm family. It's one of these multi-generational families that I talk about, mainly in a corn bean rotation. We do corn and beans really good here in Indiana. And they were no-till for many years, but they hadn't used a lot of cover crops. No grazed animals, none. They had confined hogs, but they'd gotten out of the hog business, tore the buildings down, and they felt like they needed to make changes to move forward into a regenerative system. So over the last 3 or 4 years, while they're still in a corn beans rotation for the most part, we're bringing wheat in as much as we can. So it gives us opportunity for different cash crop, for diversity, and for this opportunity to plant cover crops after wheat. Last year on a couple hundred acres, they planted, as soon as the wheat was cut, they planted a high biomass mix, came back in September, planted a high nitrogen mix because they're going to corn. In the meantime, for the first time ever on this farm, they brought cows back in and they ran it through those cover crops. So the biology we're getting out of the rear end of that cow, going onto the soil, stirring the biology to pick all that biomass down from that high biomass cover crop, leading to the high nitrogen cover crop so we can plant corn. They do cover crop everything, and they basically set their mixes based on the date as they move closer and closer to when we basically are down to just cereal rye in late October and early November. Now, this last particular item I just put in 2 days ago when I talked to him yesterday, he says, we have cooney pigs now. And I said, what's a cooney pig? But these are one of the true grazing pigs. They're from New Zealand, and I guess they're a delicacy. They're a small pig, and they're going to try running some pigs through some of their cover crops. So livestock back to the farm starts building that diversity that we need. Next slide. So now I get historical on you. Now, why is this important to NRCS and all of you agency people out there? Why does it matter? This statement, what is the capacity of farming lands in the United States to feed and clothe the human family? When do you think that was said? That was not said yesterday or during the Dust Bowl, but I'm a history buff. This here is the report of the Commissioner of Patents in 1849 on the status of agriculture in the United States. This statement in red comes directly out of that. It's the most profound statement I've ever seen. This is why, as an agency, we need to be involved in the soil health regenerative movement. We need to build soil, not destroy it, and that's why it's really cool that maybe 2020 will be that revolution and the Star Revolution. Next slide. So why do I do this? I mean, I've been eligible. I turned 60 in October. Why do I keep dealing with CART and CD and all those things? I don't do it for CART and CD, believe me. I do it because I love soil health. I love regenerative agriculture. I think it's important not only for us in an agency, not only for our farmers, but for our consumers. They drive the ship because they are going to demand a higher quality food. To grow a higher quality food, we have to have a higher quality soil. It's a priority of our agency. It's a mission of our agency, always has been, always should be. And if we can develop these systems all across all land uses, all across all, we're from multi-states here today, multi-areas of different rainfall. I get 43 inches. If I got 22 inches, we're in a major drought. But so if we can develop these across all resource concerns, we have solved our resource concern issues. We got to develop regenerative systems. And we talk about the major revolutions in agriculture, hybrid seed, herbicides, commercial fertilizer, precision ag. How cool it would be to be a small part of the next revolution, which I believe is regenerative agriculture, when we build soils, not destroy it. So I encourage all of you DCs across the nation to find a way, find the partners through your soil and water districts, through any other partner you can find, to find the ability to take technical assistance beyond what you can provide to the farmer so we can build these systems. Next slide. Next slide. Because we're not doing it for the farmers now. We're doing it for the men and women, the girls and boys that are going to be farming 40 years from now. And that's why we're doing it. They're depending on us. They're depending on us to provide that technical assistance, to provide the knowledge base that they need to make the decisions to move forward. So next slide. So I challenge each of you to be a soil builder. I challenge you to find the technical assistance you need. And if you need anything from me or from any of us in the state of Indiana, you're welcome to email me, call me. I'll probably be doing something in CART, but you can call me anyway, and I'll be glad to put it down for a couple of minutes.
Very good, Don. Thank you. Thank you so much. Great presentation. It's obvious that you guys have put a tremendous amount of effort in. One question we had on our list here, and you hit on it a little bit. The question was, do you do all your soil health activities during regular work week hours, or do you do some of them after regular hours? What's your answer to that? Is it a 40-hour week job for you?
Yeah, I mean, I try to keep it that way. I mean, I do, like someone else mentioned, they try to take a part of their day on a Friday or something to do soil health. Because I am a soil health team leader, and we do have a soil health demonstration trailer, and I probably spend somewhere a sixth to a fifth of my time on soil health stuff. And that's outside of my duties as a DC. And I have a workload like everybody else, and days are long, and sometimes you get stressed out. But do everything you can to implement it as you do your normal job, and it'll just flow. You can have a soil health conversation at church. You can have a soil health conversation at the gas station. You can have a soil health conversation. I've had soil health conversations after church on Christmas Day. I get kidded for that, but if somebody gives you an inch, plug it right in there and start talking soil health.
Yep, you bet. I think that's kind of been the message that several folks have had. Does anybody else any of our other presenters want to chime in on that? How I know I had asked, I think, Marnie how she did that, how she integrated talking to people. Anybody else want to chime in on that? Chad, James, Joanne, how do you make sure and fit soil health activities into your regular work week?
Well, Doug, that's how I start the conservation. When I'm going out with a conservation plan, when I go out there, I go out there with that in mind. I start with soil health, and we go into their objectives, and I just mention soil health as we're going through it. And I try to do that with every conservation plan I write.
It's the basis of everything that you do.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I really agree with what Don said there, where he said it just flows. And I think that's what James is getting at, too, is that if it's just an ingrained part of the way you look at solving natural resource problems, then it really just does become a natural flowing part of the discussion. And then I think for me, it's really taking the time to get to know farmers, get to know the ins and outs of their operation, where their pinch points are, where their resources are, how much time and energy do they have, just all of those different things that makes every farm a little bit different, and your approach need to be a little bit different. Treating them like a human being, I think really goes a long way.
Yeah. One of our other questions was, where do you all go to find good, solid information to inform yourselves about, new upcoming things in soil health? Scientific papers, a lot of different ways to look at things. Where do you guys go to find good information to educate yourselves? What's some of your go-to sources? Maybe Don, you got any?
Well, I go to farmers. I go to the guys that are trying things on a farm level scale. Some of these guys are doing some really cool stuff. And the more time you can spend on a farm where a guy's trying something really weird, but it's working and he's seeing results, that's where I go. I mean, I love to tour farms. I've been on a lot of the different, we've been fortunate here in Indiana where our leadership team has provided the funding for us to travel to Dave Branson and to Pierre, South Dakota, and all these places where things are happening, and that's where I want to go. I want to go to people that's making it work.
I know, Joanne, I know that you had mentioned the soil health and sustainability class that you had a year ago. So since then, what what other things have you done to try to educate yourself down there in Arkansas on soil health?
I keep Troyce Barnett on speed dial. He's my go-to guy for any kind of questions I have, and he points me in the right direction.
Very good. So your other NRCS leadership, you bet. That's
Yes.
a great plan. How about Marnie? We haven't heard anything from you, Marnie, since you got started. What are you doing up there to continue to educate yourself?
Well, I'd agree with Don. I do go out or call some of the landowners, just that I know that I've tried some of it, how it's worked for them, and then I can talk to other landowners about that. I use other employees in the state that I know have done a lot. I also call Dwayne Beck quite a bit and Jay Fair, and I read a lot of books. Gabe's book, John Sticka's book, some of David Montgomery's book, and Fred Provenza.
How about you, Chad? What's your go-to learning sources?
I was thinking about that question that was asked and about how you kind of parse through information that seems to disagree. And I know that's something that Brandon and I actually do a fair amount. You know, we'll have real candid conversations about whether or not we think an idea is a good one, whether it fits our area or our state. Maybe there's kernels of truth in things, even if you don't like it sometimes. And yeah, you know, and Brandon is our regional soil health lead. So
sometimes it's hard to dig deep into those research papers and try to figure out just exactly what they were doing. You know, Barry, did you want to? Barry Fisher had made a comment on there for those of you that want to look the Q&A stuff there. If Barry, do you want to have any comments there?
Well, it seems that we do see a lot of research that's contrary from a successful standpoint, from an economic standpoint, and you just have to dive into those methods of each study and look at it. A lot of studies were never set up to evaluate yield or to evaluate the best management or optimize the best management for yield. They were looking at either a water quality study or maybe it was an erosion study or something. So, but they'll publish the yield. And so a lot of people like to grab that yield data and say, look, see here, cover crops don't work or this. But that may not have been in the methods or the objectives of that study at all. The other thing is, and it's why you got to keep vetting everything back through those successful farmers, is only those farmers have the ability to make the real-time adaptive management changes that have to take place in a dynamic system. They have to read the weather from last night to know what they're going to do today so that they can optimize yield and so that they can optimize the systems. So it would be extremely hard to do that in small plot side-by-side studies, you know. So you still have to vet everything through. There's, like Chad said, there will be bits and pieces of really solid information in most of these studies. That's what science is good for. I mean, it's just you got some really good data and good pieces. Just don't always jump straight to the summary. Their summary may show yield differences that has nothing to do with that study, but there might be some valuable data within it that you can still use and plug in once you develop your understanding of the system. And we always use the word system because that's just how these things have to be managed out there on the landscape, and that's why it's so important for us to have that really, really good local firsthand knowledge.
Yeah. I'm going to try to get through some of these other questions here. I'll just start at the bottom and work my way back up. So have any cover crop systems been developed using native species for comparison against non-native species in regard to soil biology diversity? So any of our speakers or any of our specialists out there, anybody have any experience using native species for cover crops?
We haven't in Montana, no.
Anybody else?
I'll just
Don,
jump in and say, you know, where we do use native species, you know, for different purposes in our practices, they're often very expensive. And I think they'd be cost prohibitive for something like a cover crop. So we're kind of in the same boat. We have not done that.
Okay.
We had one district up north, Don, I don't know if you've been up there to Jasper, Newton County. They put out some, they used them as intercropping. The thought being that a lot of our native prairie, like legumes, they evolved under a canopy like corn, like tall warm season grasses. And so I know they took a look at some of the, particularly the native legumes that developed under those scenarios. And I'm not sure they collected very much data or have published anything yet, but I do know that they were looking at some of those. But I don't know, Don, have you talked to them at all lately?
Don's not talking.
Don's
Don,
locked up.
have you talked to anybody on those natives, Don?
I can't tell. No.
Okay, I'm not sure where Don's at. Don, if you get that, you can come back to us. I'm going to move up to the next question. This one's from Neil. Question for Chad. Tell me more about the no-till planter retrofit program. Did you bring in an equipment guy, provide financial assistance? What did you do?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, you know, because in New Hampshire we were starting from scratch, it kind of gave us a bit of an opening and an opportunity that I think areas that aren't in that position have. So, and we also don't have tons of farmers. We really don't. So what we did was we said, okay, there's probably a certain number of farmers in our state who are really going to do this in the next few years. And the NRCS threw in some money, and then our partnership in the state got a few other grants. The districts spearheaded that. So we got a pool of money available for farmers to tap into, and they got 75% cost share on the equipment itself, and then their labor was used as in-kind match, if you're into the grant thing. And we did have an equipment guy. We worked with Jeff Sanders, who works for the Extension Service in Vermont, where they do a lot more no-till than we do, and he has a lot of great knowledge about you know, mistakes and errors that they've made and successes that they brought over to New Hampshire. So Jeff was our main person, not trying to sell equipment, but talking about the way planters get set up for no-till, how you do that right. And really, I think what Jeff did that was great, and he and I worked together on a lot of these farms, is we talked about no-till as a system, and the planter is one part of it, but you got to have your whole cropping system geared up to think differently when you're talking about no-till. So he was really great for that, but that is the way that we approach that. Feel free to shoot me an email or anything if you have more questions about it.
Very good, Chad. Thank you. So the question above that, out of curiosity, were those fake pigs that don't snort, or were they real pigs? I'm pretty sure those coonies were real pigs. Don, you got any comments on the real pigs?
Yeah, they're a new breed. I did some research on them. They're out of New Zealand. They're about to half the size of a normal pig, but they weigh about 140 pounds. They're a delicacy, I guess, and the pigs themselves are outrageously valuable. So we'll see where that goes.
The next question up there, you know, about we had 2 or 3 people that really talked a ton about partnerships, particularly with extension and land grant universities. How did you really get started with those land grant universities? Chad, you work with quite a few out there?
Yeah. For me, it really started when I was a DC. We had a really great collaborative relationship between the district and the NRCS and Extension in the county that I worked. And I could see from that where when it works well, it works really great. And then when you're out in the field and you're contradicting one another, usually not intentionally, by the way, and not out of malice in any way, it just kind of happens because you're not talking enough, that things really go sideways quick. So when I started working as a resource con statewide, and we started doing this soil health stuff as a group, extension was brought to the table immediately. And what our extension does in New Hampshire is very different than the way extension operates in our neighboring states. So I can imagine across the country, there's incredible diversity out there. They are a lot like us. They provide technical support to farmers. They don't really do a lot of research or things like that. So we're often talking to the same farmers about the same things. We often are working on the same projects, and we're both really trying to advance the same causes. As much as we can, talking more and bickering less has really helped us in our state.
I know, Don, that's been something Indiana has really, really focused on. You mentioned several partnership organizations in Indiana. You or Barry want to make any comments there on partnerships?
Well, here in Indiana, we're just extremely fortunate to have the partnership that we have. It's not new. It's been around for a long, long time. And the success we've had here in Indiana is 100% related to that partnership. I've likened it over the years to an 8-horse team of Clydesdales. If you put 8 Clydesdales hooked to something, they got tremendous power and tremendous strength and tremendous ability if they're pulling together. But if they're not pulling together and pulling different directions, you just can't go anywhere. And we've not always been 100% on the same page. And, sometimes we got to kind of drag some people along a little bit, kicking and screaming, but we're getting to the point where, we're pretty much on the same page. And so with that comes power, and it comes ability, and comes the natural ability to make drastic change and impact our environment, impact the world around us. So you got to build partnerships. If you don't have partnerships, it's just not going to work. No one, like somebody said, nobody can do this by themselves. We don't have the time, the manpower, the financial support to do that. And we all got to pool our resources, work together, and pull together. And we've got some some unusual partnerships here. The commodity groups here in Indiana are right behind us. The corn group, the soybean group, the pork producers, all those groups are part of our partnership. And so they bring financial support, drastic financial support, and then they bring that credibility that it's more than just a conservation thing.
Thank you. So we got another question down here. It says, would it be beneficial for an NRCS district conservationist with his partners to develop and lead a local farmer ranger group that meets 3 to 6 times a year to learn new information and develop peer-to-peer and hand-holding outreach? So who out there has developed a local farmer group that you meet with on a regular basis over the course of a year?
This is Marnie in Montana. I had a group that kind of instigated it and said that they, let's meet. And it was a small group. It was like 3 or 4 producers, and we meet probably once a year, and we go out in the field. We look at all their fields and what they've done. And then sometimes in the winter, before spring, we'll meet just to kind of talk about, what are the things they want to try. And that's pretty small scale. And I think in eastern Montana, they've had some of those groups where they've gone and learned more conservation district boards. Some of boards that have actually traveled out into a smaller bus to North Dakota as a group and has learned stuff. So those are just some of the things that I've been involved in.
Anybody else? Small groups, small learning groups. have you found those beneficial? James or Joanne, have you guys got any small groups down there, Texas and Arkansas?
I have not, but I think it's a great idea, and I'm going to look into that.
Mm-hmm.
Not in my county yet. I did have some starting to form when I was working in Wichita County, but since on the move, I hadn't gotten them started back up yet.
Uh-huh. Chad or Don, any small groups?
Yeah, well, we've got the organic group is one that you know, we've met several times, and yeah, it's a great opportunity. I mean, get them in a coffee shop. Last year we spent 6 hours in one of our guys' garages, and he went and got lunch for us, and we just sat there and talked about how we can make transition organic work, and these systems that we work with here, and the pitfalls and that kind of thing. So it's a great opportunity. You know, that's if you can get it started normally, it just takes a life of its own, and they take it over, and you know, you just kind of facilitate a little bit. So it's a great thing to do.
I think that's been one of the things that all of us have learned is we've got to try to find ways, and it's not going to be the same for everybody, but try to find ways to learn from those producers. You know, it's been mentioned several times today that those producers are the ones really driving the innovation in soil health today, and figuring out a way how we can connect with them and learn from them, work together with them, giving us knowledge as well as credibility with them is key to those producer NRCS relationships. So any comments or questions from anybody else? Brandon, Bianca, Barry, or any of our other presenters?
I just want to really thank each of these folks for the dedication that they've shown, and that extra drive that they are making really real conservation happen. And so it's just a joy to get to hear these conversations.
It really is. Yeah, it makes it so real. You know, we talk about it all the time, but boy, just to hear and the great diversity that we had today, all the way from, you know, state level workshops down to just, you know, one individual NRCS person working with one individual producer, you know, making a difference in that individual producer's operation. You know, that's what it's really all about. So with that, I don't see any more questions. Bianca, do you have any comments, or Brandon? If not,
I just want to thank everybody and echo what Barry and Doug just said. You know, it's just such an amazing thing to be able to see how all of you put such success on the ground, and you do that in such diverse ways. You do that across such diverse partners, working across these larger groups all the way down to the individual, and that's what it's about, and that's what we need to spread across the country. And I think you all are doing amazing work, you and your colleagues out there. And to everybody who participated today, I just want to say thank you for what you're doing and encourage you all. You know, there are more folks who are excited like you. If you're in a place where everybody's already excited, that's wonderful. Keep it up. If you're in a place where you're just starting to get it going, or even you're just starting to think about getting it going, feel free to reach out to these folks that have been in it for a while. Tap into their expertise, get some mentoring, and really move things along across the country, because we all know that soil health really will solve just about all of the agency's resource concerns, and that's really exciting to be able to make such an impact across such a broad scale across all of these lands. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We'll be putting this up on our team site, and we'll be getting it cleared so that we can post it for public availability as well.
And Bianca, did you want to mention our next webinar?
Yes, absolutely. Our next webinar is scheduled for July 24th, so it's a Friday instead of a Thursday, and we will be having on multiple state conservationists to share how they've come up through soil health, how they have learned from their field staff, how they have come to a point where they're really believing that it is what their state needs to lead, And so we'll have that conversation, and I believe there'll be lots to learn for both field staff and everybody up the line. It should be another really great conversation. And if you do have ideas for what we should focus on, topics, questions, anything like that, do feel free to get in touch. We love making this what you all need it to be, what's most helpful to you, so let us know.
Very good. And with that, we'll say goodbye to everybody.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you very much. Have a good day.